Welcome, everyone, to this special screening of the film Wandering But Not Lost. I'd like to first thank the Ho Center for Buddhist Studies at Stanford University and its Tibetan Studies Initiative for organizing and sponsoring this event. We are very pleased today to be joined by Paul MacGowan, the director and producer of the film. Paul has been working in the film industry since the 1980s, and in 2010, after meeting the Tibetan Lama Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche in Kathmandu, Nepal, he decided to dedicate his considerable background and expertise in filmmaking to the service of documenting Mingyur Rinpoche's teachings and activities. He subsequently directed and produced the film A Joyful Mind, released in 2016, which presents an overview of Mingyur Rinpoche's teachings on meditation. Wandering But Not Lost tells the story of Mingyur Rinpoche's 4.5 year long retreat in which he wandered throughout the Himalayas. After the screening of the film, which is about an hour and a half long, Paul and I will discuss the film for about 15 to 20 minutes before opening the floor for questions from the audience. So now let's all sit back, relax, and enjoy Wandering But Not Lost. Well, first of all, I just want to apologize for some of the technical difficulties that we might have encountered there. Um, Thanks so much for joining us, Paul.
Hmm.
I just
My
wanted to,
pleasure.
I just would like to start off by asking how you got involved with this film project.
Yeah, well, I've known Mingyur Rinpoche since 2010 and started working with him then, filming some of his teachings. And right off the bat, realized, he was my teacher. And as soon as I met him, just really enjoyed working with him and got so much from him. And then he had announced in 1 year he was going to do this retreat. But so, but we thought it was going to be in a hermitage or a monastery as he had done before. And then he ends up, leaving late at night and taking off and doing this. So it was quite a surprise to us all. And then, of course, he's gone for 4.5 years. And I was working on this other film, as you mentioned in the intro, A Joyful Mind. And I was just finishing that up. So that took me 5 years or so, to finish that movie. And so when he came back, I had no thoughts that I was going to make a film on his retreat. That was like the last thing in my mind. And I traveled with him, met with him in India, and traveled with him for several weeks, and these stories kept coming out. And during his teachings or just casually talking with him, he would tell a story. So it took me a couple of weeks to realize that this would make a great film. But I really had no idea that he would want to go along with it. There's a bit of a taboo telling too much about your experiences, but Mingyur Rinpoche realized how inspiring they were to people, to his students he told these stories to. So he, and that's what he's all about. So he could use them as teachings, um, and so he realized that he needed to tell these stories for his students. And so then in the meantime, I had heard through a friend that he had been asked if they could write a book about his retreat. And he said, maybe in 10 years. So when I heard that, I thought for sure he wasn't going to go along with making, the film idea. And, but I decided to ask him anyway. And I had, I spent a little time thinking about what it would be. And I presented the idea to him, and he said, "Oh, good idea." So then we were off and running, and it was quite a journey, going to all these places where he was, and getting the stories and matching them up with the places. It was it was a bit challenging because one thing that was interesting to me that I wasn't getting a lot of detail from him at certain times, when I was trying to find out, well, he would tell a story and then I'm trying to find out where exactly that happened. And because he was just all over, northern India and all over Nepal, and I was trying to find out where these places happened and kind of when, to kind of put it in the context of when it happened during his retreat. And he was a little vague, and he was so forthcoming, so I didn't feel like he was holding anything back. Um, and also his memory was so good; it was so sharp. He could remember everything. So I was kind of surprised by this. And then one day I was thinking about it, and I realized, oh, he wasn't. This wasn't. A travel log for him. This wasn't a holiday for him where he was, collecting these memories and these dates, and this happened here and that happened there. So that kind of wasn't important to him at all. So it just, he kind of had trouble remembering some of those details. I mean, they came out after a while, but some of it was a little vague. And I found that interesting myself. I'm like, oh, of course, it's not this thing. And he didn't plan on telling this story. He told me later he didn't think he would talk much about his retreat until he found out how inspired people were by these stories and his experiences.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. Did you get the sense at all that he didn't know where he was sometimes?
I think he might not have known, the name of the villages in India, that he was passing through, and he didn't know the exact, route he was taking sometimes, because that just wasn't really on his radar. He was practicing with these, difficult, challenging circumstances. So that was what he was out doing. And of course, then he had to survive at the same time by begging and finding things to eat and places to stay. So, um, but it was interesting, Lamatashi talked about how Rinpoche was just always talking about practice. Like he wasn't, like I was thinking of what I would be like if I was out there. I would be obsessed with where my next meal was coming from. Where was I going to sleep that night? Was it going to be a warm place, dry, safe? And Lamatashi said just wasn't so much on his mind. He was just always talking. I mean, they would go for long periods of time when they were traveling together without talking at all. And then it was talk. It was like really about practice, and which I find quite remarkable because I think it's really, difficult. It can be difficult to practice under easy conditions, right?
Yeah, what was it like for you in all those locations, shooting on all those locations, and how was it like to live through that shooting? It's, were you in a sense also doing some retreat of your own in those places? Was it a kind of filming retreat of sorts?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good question. Well, I have to say it was a really transformative experience for me. I because I'm traveling during this 5 year period making the film. Since Rinpoche came back, um, I'm traveling with Rinpoche. I'm getting teachings. I'm filming his teachings. All over the world, really, mostly in Asia, but all over the world. And has a lot of students in Europe and a lot here in the U.S. And so I'm really immersed in it. I'm living in Kathmandu, and you know what that's like. It's like just Dharma everywhere, and your friends are all practicing, and there's teachers that come through, great teachers. And of course, I'm working with this great teacher. So the whole thing was really quite amazing on a personal level. And then I'm going off. I'm like, okay, I'm going to, I picked out these locations and I know the stories, what happened in these certain places. And so I'd go there and I always have, at the very minimum, I have my morning practice that I do. And I wanted to keep that up throughout all the filming, so that um, just as a good habit, like not to lose that and have that, help me inform me of what I'm doing as I'm filming. So it, and so I'm dealing with all these challenges too. Of course, I have, a lot of gear. I have a really minimal crew, just a couple of friends usually helping me out a little bit here and there, sometimes more, sometimes less. And traveling in India, and well, especially India, and in Nepal to a lesser degree, it's quite challenging. I'm more familiar with Nepal, and I find I know my way around a little better. And India's bigger, more vast, more issues. And it was just I found that working with these kinds of minor irritations on a regular basis, and I was able to work through that, a little bit easier. Mingyur Rinpoche always talks about, making friends with your experience, making friends with monkey mind, actually, and making friends with your environment. And things just seemed to go, a little bit smoother as I got out of my own way, kind of, I had to just kind of let things unfold a little bit, and, spend time in these places, and see what happened. So much in filmmaking, documentary filmmaking, is left up to chance, what the weather's going to be like when you're there. And in the past, for so many years being in production, I was all about control. You know, the more you control things, the lighting, the sound, people, the conditions, whatever they are, the better the production's going to be. Well, when you're doing documentary work, it's completely different. You're not in control so much. And also when you're in India and Nepal, you're not in control at all, basically. Um, so it was a really great experience. And I had to really kind of work with my own expectations of how I was used to working for so many years.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And what was it like to work so closely with Mingyur Rinpoche also? I mean, you mentioned a little bit about kind of drawing out the recollections of these experiences, kind of tracing the itinerary. Um, to what degree was Mingyur Rinpoche informing the project, or was he kind of hands off?
Um, he's very hands off, actually. I was surprised. He, whenever I told him, he made himself very available. So I kind of lost track. I think I did 10 or 12 interviews with him, over time. Like more things just kept coming up that I would want to ask him about and have clarified. But he was very hands off. He never said, "Oh, how's it going? How are things coming along?" He's very busy. He had a lot going on too, but he just kind of had some belief, and that's his style. That's his management style anyway. He's kind of like, the visionary, and then it's okay. You get, rest is up to you guys. But working with him is really quite amazing, because in a way he's always teaching, just with the way he interacts with the world. And I saw him in so many situations. And um, if there's one people in the room, or there was one time we were in Hong Kong at this facility with 2,500 people, and he's always exactly the same. Um, he doesn't change. He's available, he's accessible, he's very present. He's relaxed. He's very fluid. So that was really quite remarkable to me. So I found myself, when I was in these, situations in India, and, the train's not showing up on time, it's 4 hours late, and you ask somebody at the train station, well, when's the train going to get here? And everybody tells you a different answer. And, when you're frustrated, it's getting dark. I've got thousands of dollars worth of gear here sitting on the train platform. And, you just kind of, uh, you know, he inspired me to kind of practice that thing of kind of just letting go, and letting, doing what you can. He says, try your best and let go of the result. That's one of his. So that was my mantra for a lot of the time because I felt a lot of responsibility with this project, to tell the story, to do a good job with it, of course, and to tell the story in an authentic way. Um, I felt a lot of responsibility. So I just like all I can do is I can do my best, and and let it go.
So, are there any particular instances that kind of stand out to you as very challenging in that regard, where you had something happen that really sort of pushed you to the limit in terms of practicing that, or any moments that were maybe especially inspiring, when you were on location?
Mm.
There's so many places, and it's just
Yeah.
mind-boggling.
Um, to the first part of that question, well, I crashed the drone a couple of times, so that was a little, that was pretty frustrating. I was not a very good drone operator at the beginning of making this film, and I learned a few things, tried to practice when I could. Um, lost one. The second crash was recoverable, and I actually used some of the footage from that, in the film. It was a crash in the upper Ganges. Um, so there were things like that. A lot of just little logistical things, which once it's solved, it's done. And you don't know why you got so worked up over it because things you find solutions, one way or another. The train doesn't show up 4 hours late, so you wait another hour and then you try to find a taxi. We were in some places there were not a lot of tourists, so they weren't used to seeing tourists at all in some of these places. So that was a little challenging. Um, as far as inspiring, really, the best time out of all the travels was, I knew I needed to get Rinpoche up into the mountains. I needed shots of him in the mountains, and his schedule was just so busy. He's traveling, he's teaching all the time. He's running his monastery, his organizations, and he just couldn't. He would love to go hiking in the mountains, but there wasn't time. So I did get a sponsor to pay for a helicopter to go to the mountains. And we went to Langtang, which is where that Padmasambhava cave was. And also, that was really just the day was spectacular. The weather was absolutely perfect. It was early spring, April. We're at about 13,000 feet, and the weather was just perfect. And being there with Rinpoche, and you could tell he was really happy to be there. It was like he had some fond memories there. He just really loved being there. So being there with him was really special.
Sounds wonderful. I'd like to open it up a little bit now to the audience, the participants. If any of you have questions, please feel free to type them into um, the. I guess you have the chat box here, the Q&A box, and we can I'll ask those questions when they come through. Um, but in the meantime, I guess I have other questions too that I'm curious about. Um, so Lama Tashi, it's his role. Oh, here's one now. I'll hold that. Oh, there's one from Professor John Kieschnick. He's asking, what are some of the films and filmmakers who have influenced your work?
Oh, yeah. There's so many. we're influenced by so many things. I gotta say, I love Werner Herzog. From early on, from when I was young, just really inspired with his courage and some of the things he did, and just getting out and doing things. And there again, on a small budget, small crew. Um, Michael Moore was an early influencer, for me. Wanting to get into doing documentaries that could be more creative rather than just kind of a journalistic approach. We could actually make them, you know, be more creative with this genre. Um, but many. There's a couple.
Yeah, I love Herzog, and I mean, especially, yeah, as you said, his bravery and the way that he interacts with the people that he's filming. I mean, it's just remarkable to watch. But also, yeah, Michael Moore. Um,
Oh, just one thing. I know there was some technical difficulties, and somebody's asking here in the chat to everyone. Um, oops, you moved. I lost it. How can we watch it again? Did I see that somewhere? I lost it. Anyway, you can watch it again at ajoyfulmind.com is the website, and there's a way to watch it again, and it won't be so glitchy. Just to throw that out. Um,
yeah, just wanted to apologize again for that for anyone who experienced that. Very sorry. I think it's really the Zoom transmission that
yeah.
on some computers just doesn't work in a very fluid way. So apologies for that. And some of you might have seen a box also in the corner. So
Yeah.
it's
So
hard to.
somebody asks about dying meditation. And actually, on the website, you can find Mingyur Rinpoche on his book tour. We were in Vancouver, and he did a really wonderful meditation on practicing at the moment of death. And it's really great. It's about 12 minutes, and it's this guided meditation. And also, so somebody's asking about how to get information on that. To know more about dying meditation. So also his book, In Love with the World, really goes into the bardos in much more detail. I made a kind of a conscious decision not to give too much detail about the bardos, just from his experientially, and not so much of the teachings of the Bardo Thoro and and what they kind of what it contains, because it can get very very specific, very detailed, and that's in his book and in many other books too. But he writes about that very clearly.
I have another question that's come in from Orion Lavallée, who you might know from Kathmandu, but she writes, I was surprised by Rinpoche's openness in talking about his meditation experiences. I wonder how this film was received by wider audiences.
The response has been really kind of overwhelming. Really positive. People are really touched by it, and actually, people have told me by a lot of non-Buddhists as well. Like Buddhists have shown, their partners or their parents or their siblings, and it's been people have been really moved by. I'm just thinking back to one story, just by the his commitment to practicing in such a way, kind of this kind of like radical move to leave his monastery, go out on the street. I remember someone's mother was really very moved by that. Um, so yeah, it has been really well received.
Other than Taisitu Rinpoche, who you interviewed about Rinpoche's retreat, were there any other responses to his departure? I mean, how did it go over in the broader community when that happened? I mean, I guess Tsoknyi Rinpoche was there too, giving his response that he was glad that it happened. But were there any maybe negative or skeptical or or other kinds of responses that you were aware of?
Well, his mother cried for 2 weeks. I heard. She was really upset, but also I think glad that he did it as well. Kind of proud of him as well. But everybody was shocked. Um, Sogni Rinpoche was quite surprised at first, and once he realized what he was doing, and um, he was happy for him. But it was quite surprising. I don't think anybody was expecting it really. He was quite Mingyur Rinpoche in the months prior to his leaving. He was kind of very evasive and very good at just like not entertaining any questions. Like, oh, I'm not really sure where I'm going to do it, but here and there, I'm going to be in India. We'll see. We'll see how I feel. So I don't think anybody really had this idea that that's what he was going to do. Um, I didn't hear one slightly negative thing I heard from somebody in Kathmandu was like, oh, he's not supposed to announce that he's leaving on retreat. Like that's somehow verboten or something. I don't really know where that came from. Um, but I think Mingyur Rinpoche is very responsible and he's got a lot of people depending on him. So I really think that was the responsible thing to do. Say he was going to go on, let people know he was going to be on retreat and not available for a few years. He didn't say, when people asked him about when he was returning, he said, oh, maybe in 3 years, but who knows, He wasn't saying it was just going to be 3 years and then he was definitely coming back. And actually, as pointed out in the film, um, he came back earlier than he really wanted to because of the earthquake. He wanted to come back and check on people.
Yes, as someone who was in that earthquake, I can understand the the impulse of wanting to kind of check in at that point. And I remember seeing him in Kathmandu actually in the months when the I guess it was in the autumn following that earthquake in the rebuilding time. And I didn't have a chance to encounter him and to really speak or anything like that. I'm not familiar with him enough, but I didn't even know that it was sort of I guess in the aftermath of the earthquake, it was of course there was a buzz that he was on retreat, but it wasn't. Everybody was so busy with dealing with that that his reemergence kind of escaped notice until all of a sudden he was on the scene again. What were some of the effects of his reappearance? Was it in any way? I mean, he mentioned that um, a kind of sense of feeling at home everywhere or anywhere, as he put it, I guess. Were there any kind of difficulties of re-entering that you can speak of, or kind of re-socializing, I guess you could say?
Um, yeah, interesting. One thing he's told me when I asked him what it was like to be back, um, he said, um, well, I opened my suitcase and there were immediately like 6 hands in the suitcase helping him. He was got used to doing everything on his own, and here he is, and all his, the monks around him, and he has one attendant, and he likes to do things for himself, and so that was a little shocking to him when all of a sudden people are just taking care of everything again. Um, and I know he likes to be independent, but he also, he'll let people do that because that's their job. He's letting people, the monks at the monastery do their job. Um, but when he first came back, he was a little different. Just the first, week or two. I think it did take him a little time to adjust to all the crowds again, and getting all that attention again. But I think it was just like a week or two, and then he was, I mean, he wasn't so different, but he was just a little more reserved than he was. It's kind of
It,
hard to
it,
put your finger on it.
sure, yeah, no, his demeanor seemed quite, I mean, noticeably different somehow in those images that were provided there that you show.
You know.
Yeah, what stood out to me it was at the beginning his description of the life of the tuku and how very pampered and it is, and and um, I just wonder what a radical move really to depart from that, but also I wonder to what extent his wandering retreat could set a precedent for other tulkus doing the same thing, or if that's just so beyond the pale that we can't actually imagine tulkus kind of departing from their relatively sheltered and pampered lives to kind of go into the wilderness or wander around and do that kind of retreat.
Yeah, I know some of the Tulkus are inspired by what he did. I'm not sure what they will do. You know, um, hard to say. Yeah. Um, there's a question here. Did he have any contact with his people while he was away, or was he completely off the grid? And he was completely off the grid. I mean, Lamatashi found him, and convinced him to send out some pictures. You know, he didn't really want pictures taken. He's like, no, no, no. But Lamatashi convinced them, saying, people really want to know that you're okay. They'd love to see a picture of you, and they want to know you're all right. So he finally consented. And then there was a nun who spotted him in Lapchi, actually. And he had her promise not to tell anybody who he was because nobody else recognized him, but she recognized him. But other than that, I think he sent a letter back through her. He left a letter with her, but that's about it. There was no other communications.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, this the chance encounter with Lamatashi really is a quite an interesting event. I mean, and I just wonder to what extent that was sort of really a chance encounter, or exactly how do you read that? What was going on there?
Well,
Was that Mingyur Rinpoche kind of fishing for Tashi a little bit, or?
oh, I don't think so. I don't think he wanted to be on his own. When Tashila first said he wanted to join him, Rinpoche was like, no, no, because he knows Tashi just wants to serve. Tashi, that's what he was, an attendant. I met Lama Tashi in 1983 when he was the attendant for Choki Nyima Rinpoche. And actually, he introduced me to Choki Nyima Rinpoche. And, he was the attendant for Tulku Urgyen, Mingyur Rinpoche's father. So that's what he was used to doing. But Lamatashi came back and reported to us about a year before he found him that he was actually in Lamatashi took 2 to 3 months and wandered around northern India himself looking for Rinpoche. And when he came back and reported to us, I was like, there's no way. It's like a needle in a haystack. He'll never find him. What is he thinking? And then here, a year later, he actually spots him. Um, Rinpoche said that he actually got confident that he wasn't going to be recognized because he was so thin and with his hair grown out, and he's in these shabby clothes, shabby robes. And his skin had actually, from spending so much time in the sun, had gotten darker. And he was just not very recognizable. So he got quite confident he wouldn't be recognized. So, because he said he had seen students. I might have been one of them because I was living close to Boda at the time. And so he said he would see students around there, and um, they didn't recognize him. So
Hmm.
he was recognized once at Sopema, and he overheard somebody say, "Oh, is that Mingyur Rinpoche?" And he just took off down an alley and disappeared. That happened a few times when he did get recognized, but he would just completely disappear as fast as possible.
Well, does anyone have any other questions in the audience? I was looking at, we have this chat box that's been coming up, and then I was looking at the Q&A box. We have two different things going on
Oh,
here.
right.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see the Q&A box, Paul. Maybe you can't, but
I
that was,
can now. Yeah.
oh, you can now. Okay. Yeah, those I asked you, but I don't see any other questions coming in right now.
Yeah.
Um,
But
what about
just so,
future film projects? I mean, what's on the horizon for you?
oh, yeah. Of course, I have all this extra media that I shot, during this 5 years. And so, what I wanted to do was take some of that and make an installation as a companion to the film. So, it's a little bit more of an immersive experience um, about some of the themes and, issues addressed in the film. So I've been working on that a little bit, and then I wanted to show people. I wanted to get like one of these virtual exhibit spaces, and so I was online looking for that, and then I found a really attractive template of this exhibition space where I could embed videos and even some 3D objects and still images and quotes and sights and sounds from these different places to kind of give you a place where you could, reflect on some of these things and contemplate some of these images. So that's on my website too, at joyfulmind.com. A little taste of that. If you scroll down just a little bit on the landing page, there's a little virtual 3D exhibit of it's a little taste of what I'm thinking. But that's really what I want to do. And of course, I'd like to do it in an actual space as well. But for now, it's just going to be online, I think.
Great. And that's joyfulmind.com.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Joyful Mind.
Joyful Mind. Okay. Yeah.
Joyfulmind.com.
Professor Kishnik has asked another question here. What was the inspiration for incorporating animation?
Yeah, so good question. I was these scenes were some really important scenes, that I thought need to be told, and I didn't have any visuals for that. I mean, film is a visual medium. I need to be able to tell that story with some images. And I was really lucky to find this absolutely wonderful young woman who from Shanghai. And I saw her through a friend. I saw some of her work, and it was exactly the style that I kind of had in mind that I wanted. Um, and she was very happy to work on this. And I thought she did a just wonderful job. But it's just really important to illustrate, the scene, to bring people in to see. We like to see Rinpoche talk and tell the story, but he's very animated and engaged. But I wanted to be able to show what some of these places look like and what it might have been. Especially the near death scene. Thought it was really important to have it there, and then also the begging in Saravasti by the Jetavana Grove. I really enjoy that story.
There's yeah, another question in the chat form there about the reaction to the film in India versus elsewhere, or maybe has it been shown in Kathmandu or
Um,
anywhere in?
Only to small groups. Once this COVID gets over, I'd like to do more screenings there, and it'll be interesting. Yeah, I really don't know what people are, how people are going to react there to it. But but with the small screenings that we had, just some small groups, some meditation groups there, some students of Rinpoche, they really enjoyed it. So
Hmm. Oh, and then there's, yeah, some other questions here about the funding for the film, and if Rinpoche was vague about when and where, are the details of the movie confirmed, or are there any kind of guesses about some of the locations or events?
yeah, the information in the movie was all confirmed. So it was some of the other stories and where it happened, or and still, I mean, I don't say when everything happened in the film. In relation to this 4.5 years he was on retreat, I don't say, oh, this was 2 years, 6 months in. I mean, I did when Lamatashi spotted him. So that seemed to be an important time. Rinpoche had already been on retreat for 2 years, or 2.5 years. And, nothing is in there that wasn't confirmed. But there are some details left out. Like I said, the dates, considered putting them in, but they just didn't seem that important, when exactly something happened. Um, yeah, as far as funding's always a challenge. But I had a bit of a track record because of the first film and traveling with Rinpoche so much. And people saw me, working hard filming Rinpoche's teaching. So I got to be known a bit, mostly in Asia. People got to know me over there, and were fortunately very generous, or I wouldn't have been able to do this.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think
Oh, there's a question about yeah, things that I missed. It's interesting. There's one story. Well, on the the Vimeo is offered for streaming on Vimeo, and there's a few outtakes there. And there is a story there that didn't make it into the film. It would need to be animated, and I lost my animator. She was already committed to other projects. I was very lucky to get her when I had her. Um, but the story told by Lamatashi is in the outtakes on Vimeo. Um, there's lots of things when, like I said, a documentary filmmaking, it's, you miss stuff. Um, you can't get everything. And you really have to, the tendency is to want to put everything in the film. And I really learned over the years to be really judicious about, really careful, really, you know, re- really putting in just the things that really work. Um, there was a director's cut at first. People were telling me it was too long when I was asking for feedback, and so there was, there's other stories, but I think this kind of captures like the core main ideas of Rinpoche's retreat.
do you think that the book project really will happen, or was Rinpoche just sort of
Well, there is the book.
pushing it off for a little bit?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I wonder what happened because, there is the book In Love with the World, but oh, so you're talking about, because that's just the first 4 weeks of his retreat, right?
Yes, yes.
So
And then there was this
that
idea
explains
of
it.
kind of making a whole
Yeah,
book of the whole thing, and then he said, well, maybe in 10 years or
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know.
I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know as far as those other stories, of course, so much happened within the first 4 weeks because his life was being turned upside down. So he's going through all that, and that's what's covered in the book, and then the film covers the rest of it. So I'm not really sure what it would be. Um, so that would be quite challenging. The narrative arc would be a bit challenging.
Yeah, I imagine, unless it was another thing entirely.
Yeah, I said that was actually Rinpoche making the fires in a cave, of course, recreating what he was doing on retreat. But that was Rinpoche, yeah.
Well, I know it's very late there on the East Coast, so I don't want to don't want to keep you too late. You're now kind of veering toward midnight, and
Yeah.
I think it's time to wrap it up, unless anyone has another pressing question. But I I just want to thank you so much, Paul, for joining us for the screening, and thank you everyone for joining us as viewers,
Mm,
and for asking such thoughtful questions. And
yeah.
I
Yeah. Thank you, James. Thank you, Irene. Thank you to the host center. And thanks for everybody out there for watching and being interested in this. Appreciate it.